Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvikacharya Statara Sata Sri Sriman His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvikacharya Statara Sata Sri Sriman His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Shaima Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Tulsi Marani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Yuga Dharma Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Priya Mridanga Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai. Go Premanandi. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga.
Hare Krishna. Well said, well said. Hmm? I have it on my phone. I would like water, please. Monday, we get a new shot at a new week. Raseshwari is the only Gurukuli here, I believe. Haribol Raseshwari. Her father is kind enough to bring his daughter. Or is it the other way?
This part is to be shorter, otherwise the weight is too heavy.
Thank you. Those of you who would like to join me in reading, we're going to be reading from the 11th canto, 28th chapter today, text number 1 and 2. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. These are too small. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gaura Premananda Hari Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Yasan Tado Jayam Udirayat Nasta Praishwa Bandreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yuttamasloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki Rantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Last week I talked about the problems that can come from identifying one's detractor or one who has caused problems in some way to a devotee. And of course, we were talking about that from a materialistic person or situation, also materialistic situations that affect one's life negatively. In particular, the wildfires that have been raging through California. And also we mentioned Hawaii because there are some disastrous lava flows that occasion the great state of Hawaii. Today I want to talk about failures to find happiness in this material world. That's going to be part of the theme of today. And so I would like to begin by reading text number 1 in chapter 28 of the 11th canto. If you have your phones available, you can read along with me. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Parasvabhava Karmani Na Presham Sen Nagarhayat Vishwam Ekatmakam Pasyan Prakritya Purushena Cha. Somebody else chant, please. Bhagavan Uvacha Parasvabhava Karmani I regret that we don't have our Krishna House folks with, not all of our Krishna House folks here with us today. Yes, Drista Dyumnapu is here, Brihat Vadangapu is here. Anybody else who's here from Krishna House? Nanda Braj Prabhu. All right, let's do the word-for-word synonyms, and what I would like to do is I would like to say the term and then have you repeat it. I don't like the way we've been doing it lately, with everybody saying the word and the translation at the same time. So we'll go back to the old method if you'll tolerate that for today. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said. Para, anyone else's. Swabhava, nature. Karmani, and activities. Na prasyam set. One should not praise. Nagharayet. Nagarhayet. One should not criticize. Vishwam, the world, Eka Atmakam, based on one reality. Pasyan, seeing. Prakritya, along with nature. Purushena, with the enjoying soul. Cha, also. Translation. Who's going to read? Brihat Vadangapu, would you read the translation? You need a mic. Okay.
Hare Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one should neither praise nor criticize the conditioned nature and activities of other persons. Rather, one should see this world as simply the combination of material nature and the enjoying souls, all based on the one absolute truth.
Okay, Prabhu, can you read the purport, please, by Srila Prabhupada? Translation and purport by His Divine Loving Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Ki Jai.
Jai.
Oh, you're right. That's a good point. This particular canto has been written, has been translated, and the purports given by disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So, in a sense, we can still say translation and purports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Because the disciples are acting under His guidance, His instructions, and I take these to be the same as the words which would come from Srila Prabhupada, because I feel that they do come from Srila Prabhupada. Okay, please purport.
Material situations and activities appear to be good, passionate, or ignorant, according to the interactions of the modes of nature. These modes are produced by the illusory potency of the Lord, which is itself not different from its master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So a devotee of the Lord remains aloof from the illusory temporary manifestations of material nature. At the same time, he accepts material nature as the potency of the Lord and thus essentially real. The example may be given that modeling clay is shaped by a child into various playful forms such as tigers, men, or houses. The modeling clay is real, whereas the temporary shapes it assumes are illusory, not being actual tigers, men, or houses. Similarly, the entire cosmic manifestation is modeling clay in the hands of the Supreme Lord, who acts through Maya to shape the glaring temporary forms of illusion, which absorb the minds of those who are not devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
So we understand then that the material energy of the Lord is illusory, but real. That means that those of us who are jiva souls are subject to be deluded by that illusory energy of the Lord, which is real. Change endlessly mutable, so that it can change, and it is always changing. And that's one of the difficulties that we experience, those of us who come into this world and take a material body. We become delusioned by this illusory material energy of the Lord, which is very powerful. It's the potency of the Lord, just as we are the potency of the Lord. And it's said that we are superior to that material energy, but that's we can be overcome with it because of our minute size. It's like the example given of the person standing on the shore of an ocean, and he hears that a tsunami is coming in, and he says, "That's all right. I've dealt with waves before. I can deal with this one." So because of his insignificant size, then, he can easily be overcome by the material energy of the Lord. And one small volcano can produce lava flows that, cause miles and acres of land to be rendered useless for the time being, at least to the human being. And yet, even with all that power that is there, that is released in a tsunami, or in a lava flow, we understand that, as Krishna tells us, all of these magnificent, wonderful things in the material energy spring but from a spark of my splendor. So we look at the deity form of Radha Kalachandji on the altar and wonder, is this the personality from whom lava flows can come? Is he the one who can produce mountains that are awe-inspiring? Is he the one that produces vast waves in the ocean? Well, this is pretty amazing. And yet, at the same time he's doing that, taking care of all the material energy, or at least having his deputies do so, he is running up and down the banks of the Jamuna, or he's out in the fields with the cows and the calves and the cowherd boys, and he's experiencing amorous affairs with the beautiful young gopis of Goloka Vrindavan. Goloka Vrindavan. So this is the Lord. He's awesome, and he's also very, very loving. And this is a principle that has been espoused, especially in other religions, by Jesus Christ, for example, in the New Testament of the Judeo-Christian Bible. He is introducing the people of that time to the loving qualities, the pastimes, but not the pastimes, the loving qualities of the Supreme Lord. Unfortunately, from the literatures that we have, he doesn't also introduce the fact that God is always a person, and that he always has gathered around him unlimited numbers of devotees who are receiving his loving glances and the remnants of the foodstuffs that are offered to him. So let us go on to text number 2 in chapter 28. Let's see. I will chant the text, and then we'll let each of you do that. Para swabhava karmani ya prasamsati. Let's say that again. Ya prasamsati nindati sa asyubrishyate swartad asatya biniveshchata. Anybody want to try that, please? Let's do call and response.
Paraswabhava karmani.
Paraswabhava karmani.
Ya prashamsati nindati.
Ya prasamsata nindati.
Sa ashubhrashyate swarthad.
Sa asyubhrikshate swartad.
Asatya bhiniveshataha.
Asata binachesata.
Parasvabhava karmani
Parasvabhava karmani
yah prashamsati nindati
ya prasamsati nindati
sa asu brashyate swarthad
sa asyubrishyasiti ghatad
asatya bhiniveshataha.
asatya biniveshata. Parasvabhava karmani ya prasamsati nindati na asyubrishyate swartat asatya biniveshata. Anyone else? Okay, let's do the word for word. Para, another's. Swabhava, personality. Karmani, and work. Ya, who. Prashamsati, praises. Nindati, criticizes. Sa, he. Asyu, quickly. Brashyate, falls down. Swa artat, from his own interest. Asati, in unreality. Abhiniveshata, because of becoming entangled. Would you read the translation, please?
Whoever indulges in praising or criticizing the qualities and behaviors of others will quickly become deviated from his own best interests by his entanglement in illusionary dualities.
Okay, and the purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada.
A conditioned soul desires to lord it over material nature, and thus criticizes another conditioned soul whom he considers inferior. Similarly, one praises a superior materialist because one aspires to that superior position, in which one may dominate others. Praising and criticizing other materialistic people are thus directly or indirectly based on envy of other living entities, and cause one to fall down from swa-artha, one's real self-interest, Krishna consciousness.
Read on.
The words asatya bhiniveshata, or by absorption in the temporary or unreal, indicate that one should not adopt a concept of material duality and praise or criticize other materialistic persons. Rather, one should praise the pure devotees of the Supreme Lord and criticize the mentality of rebellion against the personality of Godhead, by which one becomes a non-devotee. One should not criticize a low-class materialist, thinking that a high-class materialist is nice. In other words, one should distinguish between the material and the spiritual, and should not become absorbed in good and bad on the material platform. For example, an honest citizen distinguishes between the life of civil freedom and that of imprisonment, whereas a foolish prisoner distinguishes between comfortable and uncomfortable prison cells. Just as for a free citizen, any situation in prison is unacceptable, for a liberated Krishna-conscious devotee, any material position is unappealing. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur indicates that rather than trying to separate conditioned souls by materialistic distinctions, one should bring them together to chant the holy names of the Lord and propagate the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. A non-devotee, or even an envious third-class devotee, is not interested in uniting people on the platform of love of Godhead. Instead, he unnecessarily separates them by emphasizing material distinctions like communist, capitalist, black, white, rich, poor, liberal, conservative, and so on. Material life is always imperfect, full of ignorance, and disappointing in the end. Rather than praising and criticizing the high and low features of ignorance, one should be absorbed in Krishna consciousness, on the platform of eternity, bliss, and knowledge.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Maravishtam Sapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Dadati Swavarantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Dutta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Savadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Shah He Krishna Charana Sando Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhavyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Anantakoti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Varaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravade Pacharine Nevishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarine Nama Om Vishnu Vadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Tamal Krishna Goswaminiti Namane. So we are encouraged to come to an understanding about this material world as being Krishna's material energy. And we talked about it being real, and but non-permanent, temporary. It's always subject to change, endlessly mutable. And so we have trouble with that because our bodies happen to be one of those things that is endlessly mutable. It's always going through some kind of change. So what we have to understand, and we learned this early on, the purpose of Krishna's material world. It's a place for us to come and try to find happiness. And as long as we're abiding by the laws that have been set down by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and work in cooperation with the demigods, we can have relative happiness in this material world. But unfortunately, those laws have been lost and the lawgiver has been forgotten. The Supreme Lord, He allows us to come into this world and forget Him. Isn't that nice of Him? Means that you don't want to worship me in the spiritual world? Then I'll give you another place to come to where you can pretend to be me. And see how that gets on. So Krishna then has created a world, and He has taken as His duty to help us find happiness. To give us opportunities to use all of the trappings of this material world to try to fulfill all of our desires, because as conditioned souls, that's what we want. And as pure spirit souls in our original state, we're accustomed to never-ending happiness in that spiritual realm, but we have been given the opportunity to come and check out this material grandeur of the Supreme Lord and to see what we can do with it. And so as a result of being born into families in which everyone convinces us, or tries to convince us, and usually they're pretty good at it, that we are these bodies and that the purpose of being here in this material world is to find pleasure for ourselves, to maximize the pleasure. And that's what we attempt to do in this lifetime. I mean, we spend our whole lifetimes and then suddenly, bam, you're 80 years old. And you realize that just as your father has gone on before you, your grandfather has gone on before you, all the way back as far as you have any knowledge, other people have had to give up their bodies when they came into this material world. And so we look back and think, what have I done? What is all this? Going to school for the first 1/3 or 1/4 of my life to try to gain some ability to earn money so that I can get married, or I have girlfriends like Krishna does, and I can make them all happy because I'm going to become wealthy. Or at least I'll have some kind of abode, some kind of house that my wife can call her own, and that's the nest. And from the nest come all the little chicklets. And so you spend your life doing that, and then as time passes on, suddenly your little chicklets are in their 40s, and now they're in their 50s. And where does that put you? That means 70s and 80s for you. And we have some idea about the non-glorious aspects of being having an old body. I was about to say being an old body, but we're not. But we identify so closely with that. So what do? We fail. We succeed a little bit and we fail. And we succeed a little bit and we fail. And it goes on like that throughout our entire lives. And we don't come to understand the reason that we have to fail. Give you an example, personal example. I began my college career when I was 17 or 18. And when I started my second year of college, one Sunday night at church, I suddenly developed a sharp pain in my side. And all of this led to my having to abandoned my plans for going to college for my second year, a community college in Mississippi, rural Mississippi, and so I had to have a kidney removed. Well, it was of no consequence. The thing didn't work anyhow, so they just took it out and it stopped the pain. And so I was, even though I thought, when I heard that I was going to have the operation, I thought, well, there goes my college career, finished, no more college. And before I knew it, I was back riding a bus going to the community college, which was about 45 miles from where I lived. And so I didn't really stop to ask the question, well, why did this have to happen? But as I went on, got into university and eventually graduated in 1968, one of the first notices congratulating me for graduating was from a draft board saying, "Come down, we got to check you out. We're ready to check you in. Check you in. When we're checking you out, we'll check you in, and you'll become part of the team." And at that time, all the young fellows of my age were going to Vietnam. As a matter of fact, we have some people in our community here who have been to Vietnam. Radhanath Prabhu, who has the farm out in Terrell, he spent tour of duty there. He shot and got shot at. And so, had to go through all that. But when they called me, I said, I've got one kidney. Does that make any difference? And they said, send us a letter from your surgeon. So I got in touch with my surgeon in Mobile, Alabama, sent them a message, and they sent me back a classification of 1E, which meant that it's different from a 4F. 4F means you're not suited for anything. You're no possibility. But I think it was a 1E that stated that I could only be called up for certain kinds of service in the event of an emergency. I could be called. And of course, then I said, okay, thank you very much. And I went on my way getting married and taking a job and just, but I didn't even think that there was a purpose for having to suffer like that. And nor did I give any credit to the personality who was in charge of my life all that time, even though I didn't know about it. So Krishna had a plan, and he kept me from going to Vietnam, because if I had gone, I would likely have come back in a body bag. That's the way a lot of young men, and perhaps a few young women. At that time, I don't think we had women who were involved in the actual military fighting. They were never on the front line, never having to carry a gun. At least that's what I remember. Now things have changed, and even young women get to go out there and face the enemy, which is not such a good thing. That's not the way things are supposed to be according to the Mahabharata. So did I become enlivened by my failure? No, not at that time. But I went ahead and took a job, and in 3 years with that first job, I was fired. Because I was working I had a degree as an electrical engineer. I was working as an engineer, but it was a sales engineering position, and you had to make a certain quota to maintain that position. Well, I did not, so I was fired. And the people that I was working with had one or two persons made it very difficult for me, because the one that I was directly working with, I had to go out with him. He was a young man. He was, and he liked to party, and he liked to chase women, and I was newly married, and I was not at all interested in boozing and chasing women. So I lost that job, and that was a failure on my part. I felt that it was a failure. But then shortly thereafter, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee, and when I got the notice and I just left the office, my wife and I took off, and we went to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, which was about an hour's drive away. and I felt that a huge burden had been lifted off of me because I could not conform to the kind of standard of fidelity or infidelity that the person that I was having to work with was trying to get me to accept. I could not do that. It just wasn't, that wasn't the way I was raised. So I left that job and I found myself working with the Tennessee Valley Authority in downtown Knoxville, Tennessee. And by that time, my hair was getting rather long and my beard was growing out, and I was thinking about anything but engineering. And I would take every 15-minute break that I got in the morning and the afternoon to get out, and sometimes I would just walk the streets, you know. And one day when I was walking the streets, this was in June of 1973, I came across this very unusual sight. A bunch of young boys out there wearing funny clothes and playing on little hand cymbals things and chanting something, singing some kind of song in another language I didn't know. So anyhow, I stopped by there, and here, kind of long-haired, long beard, and I was just standing there looking at them, watching them, And one of them came up to me and started telling me a little bit, and then said, would you like to buy a book? I said, sure. How much? And I think he said, oh, most people give $5 or $10. I said, okay. So I think I gave him a $10 bill and started to on my way back up to the office. And he said, read the book. So I did. Now, this is a story that I've told here in the temple before, so some of you are very familiar with that. But anyhow, that was, to me, that was the beginning of my spiritual life. That was the first Krishna book, Canto 1, Part 3. And I remember one of the titles of one of the chapters was Dhritarashtra Quits Home. And I thought, well, now that's an interesting way to say something, isn't it? He quits home? What does that mean? And at the end of that, book, I think there was a young man who came up here wearing no clothes, and his body color was bluish, and he was given a special seat of honor, and he was going to talk to a king. I said, I got to find out more about this. What's going on here? And it was Shukadeva Goswami, of course, coming to enlighten Parikshit Maharaj, telling him what's the duty of a person who is about to die. So I went through some failures. I had a physical attack. Is that adibhotic? Or is it adiatmic? Or is it something that's caused by the demigods, which would be adibhotic? Adiatmic, yeah. I agree. It's two ways to look at it then. But anyhow, that was a failure of my body, and I thought that ended my career. But instead, it set me up not to have to go to Vietnam. But I could not see that at that time. And then I lost my job, and I felt like a failure. I felt, well, I should have performed better somehow. I should have been able to get that $1 million quota made. And I was not able to, and I didn't realize it, but Krishna he was extricating me from that situation. And it was so wonderful. But the next situation that I got into, which started out to be a pretty interesting thing, like most jobs do. Started out to be pretty interesting, got money coming in again, and that's nice. Your position in society has been reestablished. And I was so bored. And I read all kinds of books about back to the land and, dropping out of society and doing other things like that. And all of a sudden, and then I get this book handed to me. And the next thing I see is a Back to Godhead magazine that has an article in it about a farming community up in the hills of West Virginia, of all places. And I started communicating with them up there. And this young fellow was kind enough to talk to me, and so anyhow, I was really close to giving up my job. So I went in on a Wednesday and said, I had a sheet of paper there that says on Friday I'm out of here. I didn't even give them a 2-week notice. I said, I'm gone. So for the next 4 years, my wife and I lived up in the hills of Tennessee, hoping to establish some kind of self-sufficient community. But it just didn't happen. The people that I was around, they were kind of hippie-ish and really into smoking dope and having sex and a lot of things. And so that didn't work. So that was another failure for me on my part. But then while I was still there, right before my second son was to be born, I sent out resumes and got another engineering job, got a couple of engineering job offers, strangely enough, because I still had pretty long hair and beard. And I'd been doing nothing engineering for about 4 years. But anyhow, a couple of companies invited me to come and join them. So we took one of them, and that took us into Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is where the first atomic weapon was tooled up. It was called Oak Ridge National Laboratory. That was where I went to work. And so I tried that for a couple of years, but by that time I'd already met other devotees about 20 miles from where we were living. And right there, we were in Oak Ridge. It was in Knoxville. We had a person who had just gone up and taken initiation at Gita Nagari Farm. And then he and his wife had come back and had set up a little temple room in their home there in Knoxville. And we started going with them. So eventually that led to Tamal Krishna Goswami's coming up. And he made 3 stops in Tennessee. He made Memphis, Nashville, and Knoxville. And then he went back to Dallas to begin operating, being the main influence here. And eventually, then that led to our coming down here to visit, and then to our coming to stay. So that was in 1980 that we came back. So as I went through my life, I was seeing so many failures, and I just wondered, what's going on here? And then I became bored. I could probably have stayed with that engineering job with the Tennessee Valley Authority for the rest of my life, and grown old and died there, but just too bored. So this Krishna consciousness thing was pretty interesting. So Krishna has set up these failures for me to initiate a change, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was seeing that this material energy of the Lord is really endlessly mutable. It comes in all kinds of varieties. So I began to see that I began to ask questions. When I came into touch with the devotees, began to ask questions, and I was getting a lot of answers from Srila Prabhupada to questions that I'd never even thought to ask, like, who am I? I had no idea that I was different from this body. And so that's the way a lot of us have come to Krishna consciousness, by these questions that come up and then getting answers to them. And then we come to understand other people's roles in our lives and what we're supposed to do. And we come to the point of discontinuing our blaming others for our failures. And that's one of the most refreshing things to me about Krishna consciousness. I no longer have to look at others and say, you're the cause of my failure. You didn't do this, you didn't do this, and you did do this. And looking back at all the persons who had been examples in my life, they had been exemplars, I should say, in my life, and realizing that they were fallible soldiers. When I really needed information, when I needed knowledge, they didn't have it to give. They were just simply in a state of ignorance. So I had to make some sense of the failures that I was going through, and one of the first things was being awakened to the existence of the Supreme Lord, because we'd been going to church all our lives, and my wife and I had. And we'd heard from various preachers about why, about God is lovable, and Jesus is God, but he's just got a fleshly body. So all of these things I couldn't understand, but when I came into touch with the devotees, then I began to understand that we're not the body, we are the spirit soul. That Jesus Christ was not that body that he was in, but rather he was a very pure representative of the Supreme Lord, not God himself, as many Christians would have us to believe. But when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one cometh to the Father but by me. If you have seen me, you've seen the Father. So we could say something like that of Srila Prabhupada, couldn't we? That, in other words, that's what a real spiritual master tells us. If you have seen me and you understand the reason that I am as I am and that I do what I do and that I say what I say, is that I'm a representative of that Supreme Lord. And he does not have to take a material body. He does not come into this material world as I have come into this material world. And so we began to learn then that there's a spiritual realm in which God exists, and it's outside this universe. And we didn't even know that this universe was kind of an enclosed thing, and that everything that went on in here was all determined by the Supreme Lord. He was the one setting up all of the scenarios for us to live through and to try to get us to the point of turning our heads and seeing him. So he sends us lousy people to work with. I say lousy because they were just who they were, acting out their role. And just as the text has said today, we should not criticize anyone else any materialistic person for the way that he acts. We should not criticize them, and we should not heap praise on them, because they're all just simply acting out the role that they've been given by the material energy of the Lord. And Krishna is with us at all moments. He's the one that, that gives us the strength to do what we do and takes away sometimes our body's ability even to walk on its own or to do things with one's hands. Had a friend of mine that took a dive into a river. This is an old hippie friend. Went up to Iowa to visit with them for a little bit, and they live close to one of these gravel pits that had filled up with water, from the Mississippi River. They'd been swimming there, and he made one last dive before they were to leave, and then he came up and he was a quadriplegic. He hit the bottom of the gravel pit, and so Krishna can take away even the functions of these bodies at any moment that he wants to. And as devotees, we realize that even that has a purpose. It's to get us ready for something that is much more glorious than our stay in this material world. So we come to know the nature of the spiritual realm and the person who is the one who's the main attractive feature there. He is the show in the spiritual world. And he also is the behind-the-scenes person here in this material world. And so what we as devotees do then is that we try to help remind others that there's a place that we have come from. That's another thing we didn't know as Christians, that we came from some other place. In other words, that we have always been, we've always existed. There used to be for the soul, there's neither birth nor death, nor having once been. That wording was changed, and I'm glad they changed it, because when you say, nor having once been, that gives you the impression that there was a time when you did not exist. But the new version of that, with better understanding as far as I'm concerned, is that the spirit soul has not come into being in the past. At present, he is not coming into being. In the future, he will not come into being. He has always been, and he's part of the energy of the Supreme Lord. So just as Krishna is eternal and has always been, always will be, so are we eternal, always have been, always will be. And we are at the present, but at the moment we're covered over by this gross body of ignorance. And so how do we get out of here? By just simply trying to please the Supreme Lord. And what does he like for us to do more than anything else in this world? Help other people, yeah. Yeah, that too. Chant the holy names continuously and teach other people the same knowledge that you have been given to get us out of the ignorance. That's a big problem we're facing in this world, is gross ignorance, and a lot of it. And so if we really care about other people, we will make the attempt, just like I saw you, Briat Badanga, you and Dristadumna Prabhu, out distributing books over here about 2 blocks from here when I was going to the dentist office over there. That then is the way to get the favor of the Supreme Lord. Do something that he really wants to see happen, not for his own benefit, but just because we're here, we're suffering, and he wants us to get back so that he can play with us. Hare Krishna. Thus spake Zarathustra. Yes, sir.
You raise a very beautiful point that what Krishna like us to do, and Prabhu mentioned chant Hare Krishna. Just want to add something. It's a homework. It's not easy. It's a lifelong homework. Utsahat, Nishchayat, Dharyat, Tatatata karma pravartanat, Shangatago, Shatovritti. What's the last one? Anyone knows here? Prasiditi Avinashati. Hold on.
So, do you have a question, please?
Okay, no. I'm just adding something. We take this process so lightly that we know this thing. We can do this thing. Now we got it. But it's a lifelong homework. It's a homework where we have to do every day. We are struggling with the mind every single day. We don't want to make a show off that we are really great devotees. We know where we are coming from, who we are, and what struggle with our mind. First is humility. If that is there, everything comes up. But the moment we try to show that we are something and we know this thing, that point, it's dangerous. It's literally dangerous. And honestly, we don't know. Honestly, we don't know anything. Ask your mind. Ask our mind. Do we know something? So yeah, thank you. I was just adding that chanting is the process, but we should not take it lightly. It's everyday homework. When we chant 16 rounds, just chanting mere 16 rounds is such a big deal for us. What to talk about other things?
All right, good. Let me stop you here and ask, does anyone have any questions? Or any other comments?
I really appreciate this class, Prabhuji, because one thing I really enjoy about Krishna consciousness is the gray area. You know, I hear often people say, don't judge me. However, we have these rules and regulations and these understandings what's favorable for our Krishna consciousness and what's not favorable for our Krishna consciousness. And so we do judge. But then this verse right here that you're giving is explaining how we look at praising or criticizing material nature. So I guess if I would like to ask the question, what is the response to people who have this attitude of don't judge me?
Just because I judge you doesn't necessarily mean I'm criticizing you, does it? But I'm not judging you, but I'm judging rather your actions or the words that you say. And if you once you come into contact with the truth, if someone is speaking something that is not the truth, then you make the judgment that this is not what we need to hear. Or if someone is acting in a way as this young fellow did, that whenever I was in that job, my first job out of college, if he tries to get me to go out with him to a bar and pick up women, do I make a judgment there? Oh, you bet. I made a judgment really quick that even though I was not into Krishna consciousness at that time, that was something that was immoral, that I did not do, did not want to do, and thank you very much. So we have to make a judgment. We do, and when we're raising our kids, we also have to teach them how to make judgments about other people, don't we? If this person's actions are this, and this, then you need to get away. And then you need to find some adult that you trust to go to. So we do have to make judgments, but we don't have to criticize others. We criticize rather behaviors and the words that we hear coming out of their mouths, don't we? We're not at the highest level, perhaps, of in other words, what are the three levels that a person goes through when a person is brand new? What is that called? Yeah, Kanishta, Madhya, and then Uttama. Perhaps. Well, I know. Speak for myself. I'm not at a very high stage, but we are required to make judgments, and so that other people are not wrongfully swayed. We have to do that even among ourselves as devotees. If we hear one devotee saying something that is not beneficial to be heard. In other words, if sometimes I'm with my godbrothers and they will say things that are that they've heard from other people about my spiritual master, which are derogatory, slightly derogatory, and I can't tolerate that because that they have heard something from someone else about a person that I consider to be a pure devotee. A person who has given up his life to bring me closer to Krishna. So I cannot permit that to go on. And if I can't cut the person's tongue out, then better that I just leave the situation. Or if I cannot present an argument, if I don't feel that it's the right time to argue about this point, then I can simply walk away. But yes, we do have to make judgments, but we don't criticize. Actually, criticizing is kind of like gossip, isn't it? If it depends on the purpose for which you're criticizing. If you're doing it with the idea of helping another person to overcome something that is an obstacle in his devotional life, then I'd say do it. If that's criticizing, then all right, go ahead, criticize it. Get that person's head turned around so that he doesn't continue to be blasphemous or to be unnecessarily materialistically attached.
I was thinking I really appreciate this and that it's a part of the recipe for being joyful, right? I'm not going to do anything that's going to hurt myself, that's going to bring me in a place that I shouldn't be. But also I'm not going to look at others and criticize them and put myself in a bad position in that way too. So you can stay joyful, protecting myself, but yet not looking bad on others. Thank you, Prabhuji.
All right. We are ready to end here. We're over time. So thank you all very much for coming and being with us. We offer our respectful obeisances unto all of you who are just like desire trees. You fulfill the desires of everyone. You're full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vancha kalpata rubhyascha, kripa sindhubhya eva cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Shri Shivara Kalachandjidam Ki Jai Gaura Premanand. Garland, are you trying to buy me off?